Hi everyone, welcome to Game 3 of the Doeberl Cup 2024, the Premier Division. Okay, so I haven't had a good start. I'm on half a point out of 2. I'm thinking, why am I here? These guys are crazy. Should have been training more for this. And I come across round 3, my opponent. I looked up his name, Ashwath Kaushik. You might have heard of him. I looked him up on Google to see who this person was, and to my surprise, news headlines came up. 8-year-old Ashwath beats chess grandmaster, sets new world record. Oh my god, I'm playing that guy. On Sunday, 8-year-old Ashwath Kaushik from Singapore smashed the world record to become the youngest player to ever defeat a grandmaster in classical chess. I mean, what a legend. Good on him. This kid's really good. So I thought to myself, well, I'm facing this opponent now in round 3. This is not looking good. But look on the bright side. I get to play a chess superstar. So hopefully he does really well in his future, and I wish him all the best. So let's see how this game goes. I was white and I played my e4 and he played into the Sicilian. So I played bishop check. This is not a main line. This is kind of a main line, but not the main line. I decided to play something a bit different, stay away from well-known theories, and try and pick a sideline to get him. He's only young, he's only 8, and he's a really nice kid actually. And I decided to play something a bit different to try and see if I could get him off his preparation. So, hence bishop to a4. I have had a look at this move before. It's not one of the top computer moves. It's a bit of a weird move, but it does have a point. Normally you don't move pieces twice in the opening, but I guess the position's still closed. I mean, all the pawns are still on. It's only move 4. So in this case, it's not too bad. What's the point of this move? Why would you move the bishop to a4? It's a subtle point, but the idea is if I didn't move the bishop, for example, and say I castled, which is, fine, then he's got this move here, which then forces me to exchange bishop for knight. Well, it doesn't force me to, but if I move back to maintain the pin, I lose my piece. And then if I don't move back, if I move the other way, either, c3 or e2, then why did I move a bishop to b5 and back? I've kind of wasted tempo. This bishop's not very good here, and a6 has actually helped black because he wants to play moves like b5 at some point anyway. So it kind of forces me to take the knight for the bishop, and it sort of clarifies the situation, and I didn't want to create a position like this against someone so strong. So the point of bishop to a4 is, now if pawn goes to a6 threatening the trap, I can play c4, which stops it if I want to. Or if my opponent doesn't play a6, if he plays e6 to develop the bishop this way and the knight out, I also play c4, stopping or preventing the d5, and because the bishop's going to be on e7, for example, I'm trying to restrict the bishop, so my bishop can always come back into the game this way. If my opponent goes g6, which is another option, then instead of playing the c4 move, I can choose to change and play c3, which gives my bishop an escape square in such cases, and then lets me play with these pawns against this bishop. So it's a bit harder. It's a bit harder for black to gain activity in this position, as opposed to if I were to play c4 like before, then he plays bishop g7, and then this bishop's got a good range down against my pawn. Notice the pawn on c3 restricts the bishop. So it's a little bit of a move ordery thing. It's sort of like a waiting move to see which way black wants to go. So black decides to bring his knight out, so he doesn't commit to either of their moves. So I make a waiting move. Now, this is based on a pawn sacrifice that I did have a look at, and it's actually not the best move for black to take the pawn. as you see, my opponent played it, so I was like, oh, he doesn't know this opening. So my little bishop a4 move has so far has had success. So the point of this sacrifice, there is no immediate win or anything. It's just a positional sacrifice. What I'm doing is I'm gaining some extra tempo. For example, he's made 2 moves with a knight. I play rook e1, and now the knight moves back. So 2 moves with the knight, and now I get to open up the position. So I'm trying to open up position quickly. Now, what I studied was takes, and then you've got to, how do you develop from here? You can't move the knight because it's pinned, which means you can't move the bishop. You can't develop the bishop this way because then you got knights coming in and all sorts of things. So this knight's already developed. Do you develop your bishop this way? Well, the next move's going to be knight here. Now I'm threatening to win the pawn. And how do you defend the pawn? You can try and play a move like d5, but this is already considered to be losing after bishop to f4. I've got knight coming in here, forking king and rook. How do you defend the square? It's like you actually can't. You can't defend him. So you can't do that. So the only move you can really do is play your bishop out. I get my pawn back. I've swapped an e pawn for a d6 pawn. King over. Played move like a c4. Looking to connect my pieces and bring the knight behind the pawn. Take away the d5 square, and then, so for example, knight up, bishop here, and you can see I've got a very strong knight on d6. Material is even. He's not able to castle. If he tries to play g6 and king g7, I've always got to check. So I felt like this position's like, I worked out slight advantage to me, and this is what I was aiming for. However, he didn't take the pawn. He decided to play c4, which is really interesting, keeping the position closed. And also renews the threat of trapping my bishop. So I've got to watch out. Once he plays a6, I've got to make a quick decision. Now, looking at the position, my first instinct was to play c3. As you can see, to give my bishop a square, and solidify my center, and then play slowly with knight out, things like that. Maybe not knight out, but I am a pawn down, so I didn't really want to play such a slow game. I wanted to like mix things up a bit, try and keep him guessing. So after c4, I came up with an idea to double my opponent's pawns and fix the center. So I'll show you what I mean. So I played bishop g5. Computer doesn't like it. Computer suggests, which is actually really good, knight a4, and then followed by taking the pawn with the knight. So let's just show, even if he plays this move. I saw this and I thought, oh nah, if I can't take because I get a fault. But well, that's checkmate. Would you believe? So yeah, I should have looked a bit further ahead in the opening. I decided to play here, which is you'll see why. So my idea was that this knight's pinned, and this pawn's pinned. So if I take the knight, he's going to have to take back this way with the g pawn, and this sort of stuffs up his kingside position. So you'll see what a6, threatening to trap my bishop. I take this bishop, because if I take this bishop here, he can take with a knight, and what am I doing? I haven't doubled anything. So the computer still thinks I'm actually slightly ahead, but this is my plan. Bishop takes, f6, g takes. This sort of makes it harder for him to castle kingside. Then I took the other knight. So I wasn't interested in, look, there's basically a threat of b5 now. So if I want to save my bishop, I have to waste the move. Then b5 comes, and then bishop b7, for example. Yeah, I've got a bishop attacking a pawn, but he's got equally good development down here. This bishop can come to h6 and swap off for a knight or something. But like he can get out of this position, and I didn't like the activity of the bishops. So I decided to take this one and the knight, and then he took with a queen. And then I played this move. d5, which was the point of my last few moves. I foresaw this position. So the reason I play d5 is because e6 and bishop e7 creates a pretty good shield in front of his king. He can even play d5, and it's a really good shield for this rook. And then why did I give up a pawn? Now I wish I had a pawn so I could play e4 and swap and open up his king. But with his, let's just make some moves. For example, like this, if I bring the queen up, it's like move like this. Just an example. Bishop can go here or here. Yeah, how do I break through this? He's got these pawns cover all the squares. My knights have not got that many options. Maybe this one can come to c5, but then worst case he could swap it off. So yeah, this is a pretty good strong pawn center. And then he's got ideas of even just bringing the king over, for example, over there, and then starting his own attack down the g file. So with this concept in mind, I decided to swap off both my bishops or both his knights and play d5, sort of fixing this. Now it restricts him from playing this. He can play it, but I'm going to be able to open up the position. It gives me an extra square for my knight to jump in. So you'll see how this continues. So he plays rook to g8, activating the rook, and you can see, I can see the idea of the queen coming over. What I wanted to do was try and maybe attack this pawn. I thought, if I can win this pawn back, material's even. So I played knight to d2, looking to take and then potentially jumping into that good square, thinking that's a good square for my knight, and also I'm threatening to take with the discovery as long as his queen doesn't defend this square. So a knight on c4 would be in a good position. So he played queen to g4, threatening checkmate. There's only one move to stop it, g3, but does a good job. I've got a good defense in front of my king. This move also defends the pawn. So he plays bishop out, counter-threatening my pawn, and aiming to, I guess, keep my queen tied to the pawn. If I play c3, look at this, bishop comes in here, they defend each other, queen can come back and take this pawn, then he can play this and my whole setup's ruined. So one careless move and it's going to be really hard for me. So I decided to go with activity and I played queen to e2. So he can take the pawn if he wants, but I really want to get rid of that pawn, and then his bishop doesn't have a good square to anchor on. So for example, if takes, now I'm threatening knight takes d6, check, winning a pawn back, or winning a pawn. So I'll be back to even material. Yeah, so that's my threat, and I'm also threatening the bishop. So he has to move the bishop, for example. Bishop goes back somewhere. I don't know, maybe there. Well, not there. We can go there, but check. And then if I want to, I can swap off. For example, like something like this. So I felt this position would be good for me. I'm back to even material. His king's stuck in the middle. What's this bishop doing? My queen, for example, can switch over here if it wants to and try and come in on the queen side. Can play rook c1 and queen there, followed by queen up. This rook can't really defend. So this is the sort of ideas I was coming across. So he defends the pawn, and again I can't play c3 because the bishop's going to be on a good square. So I decided to look, I'm not going to be able to win the pawn. I can't attack it a third time. Let's just try and open up lines and attack on the queen side while he's still got two pieces undeveloped. So he takes, and I take with the pawn. Inaccurate. I should have taken with this pawn and given up the pawn. There's the crazy computer line where I come here and his queen's almost getting trapped. So this was the move, for example. Whoops, not there. Queen to g6. The computer says queen g6, and then rook c4. I didn't see all this. Like I had to foresee all of these moves. Queen e3, queen coming in, and then rook going there, and then that sort of ends up as a checkmate in 2. Check and checkmate. Right, so I mean things could have gone differently, but that's the general consensus why the pawn takes is better, because it allows me to activate the rook up and across. I took it with the c pawn, and my opponent played rook to c3, and I decided to go rook c1 to swap off his active rook for my rook that was doing nothing. So he swaps the rooks off. Now, when I had the rook and queen here, the bishop couldn't come out because it's checkmate. So this, I'm wary that soon he might be able to develop the bishop finally. So in the meantime, he played queen over, realizing that I've got a rook coming in here, I've got a queen coming in here, and I've got potentially a knight coming in as well. So I've got 3 pieces that can quickly move over to the queen side. And coming on the back against his king can't castle. His bishop's still stuck here, and the pawns block his king in. So his king is open on, it's open on the queen side here, but it's very blocked on the king side. And so for his king to get away, he'd have to move the bishop and then run the king over and run the king up. And at this point, if the king's here, I've got queen takes pawn, so he has to defend the pawn. Like it's a very clunky position. So here's the pawn up still, but this center pawn really restricts these whole 4 pawns here. So I followed up with my plan of queen up and trying to bring the queen in. He went to queen a5 to, I guess, try and stop my ideas of rook in, attacking the pawn and attacking that pawn. Now I played a mistake, gives up a big chunk of my advantage, like a whole piece worth. I was +5, now I'm only +2. The correct move in this position was actually knight to e4, and look at that, I'll read you on the arrows. I can, well, let's just draw them again before the viewers here. Knight e4 threatens, knight takes f6, which wins a rook. Knight e4 threatens knight d6, check, which wins a bishop. So I've got 2 checks and that pawn is pinned. So there's 2 ways, well, there's a few ways out of it. You could move the king out of the way, for example, king to d8. But now that king's moved over to the queen side, I can go back to my original plan and play queen to a7 and give up a whole knight, you say? Well, check and checkmate. It's the same checkmate as before. So that's my threat. So the only option would be for my opponent to take the knight, and then in which case I would take, and then now I'm threatening this pawn. I saw to here and I thought, well, I've got rid of a good knight for his bishop. I'm going to have to move my queen over here and then to try and come in. But he would play a move like this, and then I didn't realize, well, actually I can go in the other direction now. Queen takes pawn, threatening the rook. Rook's got to move somewhere. Say it moves somewhere here, like defended by the pawn. Then I've got to check and I can take the piece. So I come around from the king side this time, and then around from the queen side, and I come around the back. So I'm playing at the edges here. So yeah, that would have been a better move. What I decided to play was queen to a7, looking at the idea of coming in again with a check, and then a checkmate. Check, so, and then king up, and then checkmate. My opponent plays bishop to h6, and I check, and then I realized he can block with the queen. So there is no king up and checkmate. So he's defended that threat. However, I can now finally win my pawn back. So after all these moves, he's got his bishop out. So he's got his 2 bishops looking good, but he had to give the pawn back. So material's been restored, but he's gained some activity in the meantime. But he has a weak pawn here. I do have threats to bring my rook in, so I still feel like I've got an advantage. He played a5, I guess not to lose the pawn, and I said rook c7. So this, before I had my queen and rook here attacking the pawn from the front, now I've got my queen and rook attacking the pawn from the side. It's actually probably better from the side, because if he tries to run away with his king, rook takes pawn, and then rook takes the other pawn of check, and then check. Like along here, it's a good battery because it actually you can keep taking pawns. Whereas on the front, once you take this pawn, there's no other pawns behind it. So he finally got his bishop out, and now he takes the knight, and I took back, which is again a mistake. Would you believe? It gives away that gives away another piece worth of advantage. So you can see how hard chess is. Who wouldn't take the bishop? It's ridiculous. So what I should have played was to ignore the bishop and play knight to d4, counter-attacking this bishop and looking at knight c6, which forks queen and the important e7 square, which would be attacked 3 times and would be like overrun. So it gives, for example, bishop here, knight c6, and now the computer's already saying you have to give up your queen, because there's something like king f8. You've got, or you lose your queen. Sorry, yeah. If you move, where are you going to move your queen? Your queen's trapped, so it's saying to give up the queen. And then you've got a rook and 2 bishops against a queen and knight, but like I'm threatening checkmate. So you can't even, the bishop can't even defend the pawn because of this pawn that I doubled earlier. Everything's all in each other's way. So you'd have to like run with the king, and then you've got, check there, and then you'd come in with a knight threatening that one. So rook goes to defend, and then you go check, and then you win the rook. Like it's queen and knight are actually a pretty good combination. Well, actually, he'd probably take that way. But then, yeah, I'm taking here. Got myself a passed pawn. These are going to get collected. It's all sorts of trouble. King's still trapped. I've also got potential for a passed pawn here. So yeah, it's pretty in trouble. Yeah, so taking the bishop actually is a mistake. Again, I'm still winning. Yeah, my opponent decides to activate the rook. I mean, what else is the rook doing? And now, actually, if the rook manages to get to b4, it could bounce around and defend, help to defend. So I decided to play f4 to cut the rook off. Opponent played h5, and then I played knight c4, again threatening to go into here and restrict. Looking at coming in there. I'm also looking at taking and coming into there, which is the move that I really want to play. So I really want to get to c6. I also set up a trap. My opponent was looking at this side of the board and played h4 and didn't realize my knight could come back the other way and actually fork 2 pieces. So while I was threatening the a5, c6, I also had a threat of here. So he takes the pawn, I take the piece, check, takes, and now it's pretty much over from here. You'll see check, king over, and checkmate. Went all the way to checkmate. So that was my game against round 3. I actually had a win, so I'm back on 50%. I was very surprised to have this win, and I'm very grateful for this game. And yeah, I'll if you've got any questions, let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next one, round 4. Feeling better about myself.